I'll be there was all I said. My sister-in-law exhaled into the phone like she had just won something. She hadn't. She had just handed me everything I needed. Let me back up. My name is Mara, and I am 31 years old. I have a master's degree in forensic accounting, 7 years of experience untangling financial fraud for a regional firm in Charlotte, and an extremely low tolerance for people who think that because I smile quietly at holiday dinners I am not paying attention. I am always paying attention. It is literally what I get paid to do. My husband, Caleb, is the kind of man who genuinely believes the best in everyone, especially his family. It is one of the things I love most about him and one of the things that has, over the years, required me to build a very specific set of quiet guardrails around our shared life. Caleb sees generosity. I see exposure. He sees family loyalty. I see liability. We are, in most ways, a perfect balance. Except when it comes to his sister, Dana. Dana is 35 and has never once in her life been wrong about anything. According to Dana, she has also never once in her life held a job for longer than 14 months, managed to keep an apartment without a cosigner, or acknowledged that the money she borrowed from Caleb and me over the past 4 years constitutes a debt rather than a gift. $12,000 over 4 years. I tracked every transfer in a spreadsheet labeled miscellaneous because I did not want to start a fight. I tracked it because that is what I do. I track things. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches before I tell you what Dana actually did the moment she thought I wasn't looking. It started on a Tuesday in February. Caleb and I had just closed on a refinance of our house 3 months earlier, locking in a rate I had spent 6 weeks negotiating. The equity was ours. I had structured it carefully, intentionally, the way I structure everything. We had $94,000 in accessible home equity and I had no intention of touching it for at least 5 years. That was my plan. Written down. Filed. Done. I do a quarterly financial sweep the way most people do laundry. Routine, slightly tedious, necessary. I pull every account, every inquiry, every credit flag. It takes about 40 minutes and I do it with coffee and a playlist, and it is genuinely the least dramatic part of my week. Until it wasn't. There it was, buried in the inquiry section of my personal credit report. A hard inquiry from a home equity lender I had never contacted. Dated 11 days earlier. Not Caleb's name. Not a joint inquiry. My name. My social security number. My property address. I did not panic. I set down my coffee mug very carefully on the coaster. I opened a second browser tab. The lender's website was the kind of site that existed specifically to move fast and ask few questions. Application to approval in 48 hours, the banner read. I knew what that meant. High fees, aggressive terms, and a business model built on people who needed money quickly and couldn't qualify through conventional banks. I typed in my email address. The system recognized it. That was the first confirmation. Someone had used my real email address when submitting the application. I clicked forgot password, entered the verification code that came to my phone 30 seconds later, and I was inside an account I had never created. The dashboard showed an approved application for $60,000 against the equity of our home. Status listed as pending final documentation. The disbursement account on file was not our joint checking. It was a personal account I did not recognize. I opened the document log. In forensic accounting, we call it a digital paper trail, and it is more honest than any witness. Every click, every timestamp, every IP address of every device that interacted with those documents is recorded automatically. Most people do not know this. They think that because they are looking at a screen instead of signing on paper, they have left no fingerprints. They are wrong. I exported the full audit log and opened it in a spreadsheet. The application had been submitted from a specific IP address on a Wednesday afternoon between 1:14 and 1:52 p.m. The electronic signature on the authorization form, the one bearing my name, had been applied at 1:49 p.m. From that same address. That Wednesday, I had been sitting in a deposition in Uptown Charlotte from noon until 4:30. I had parking garage receipts, a signed attendance log, and 17 text messages exchanged with the opposing attorney that afternoon. I had not been home. I had not signed anything. I ran the IP address through a basic lookup. It returned a residential ISP block registered to a neighborhood in Gastonia. I knew one person in Gastonia. I closed the laptop and sat very still for a moment. Here's the thing about Dana that you need to understand. She has never been overtly cruel. She is not the kind of person who screams or makes scenes. She operates in what I have come to think of as the language of gentle entitlement. Soft requests that carry the quiet assumption they will be met, favors framed as opportunities, and a particular talent for making you feel selfish for noticing that you are being used. The first time I saw it clearly was about 2 years into my marriage to Caleb. Dana had needed a cosigner for a car loan and Caleb had come to me with that particular look he wears when he already knows the answer he's hoping for. I had said no. Dana had nodded pleasantly and within 48 hours had begun referring to me, in front of mutual family friends, as someone who takes the fun out of everything. It was never malicious enough to confront directly. That was the point. She once told Caleb, loudly enough for me to hear from the next room, that I made him nervous about money. The actual phrase she used was that I had turned him into an accountant instead of a husband. I filed that one away too. What I understand now, sitting with that audit log open in front of me, is that Dana had not woken up one morning and decided to commit fraud. She had spent years building a private justification for it. In her version of events, Caleb's income was a family resource. Caleb's assets were, by extension, partially hers by virtue of shared blood. And my assets, simply by being attached to Caleb through marriage, had been absorbed into that accounting. She did not think she was stealing $60,000. She thought she was finally accessing what she had always considered loosely available to her. The entitlement was so total it had become indistinguishable from logic. That realization did not make me feel sad. It made me feel very, very clear. I did not call her. I did not call Caleb. Not yet. I called the one person I needed in that moment, which was my attorney. I had her on retainer because I am a forensic accountant and I have learned that having an attorney the way you have a dentist before you need one urgently is simply good maintenance. I explained the situation in the same flat tone I use when presenting findings to a client. She asked 4 questions. I answered all 4 without embellishment. She told me what I already suspected, which was that an electronic signature obtained without authorization on a financial document constituted identity theft under federal statute, and that if the loan dispersed before we stopped it, we were also looking at wire fraud. She told me to preserve everything, change nothing, and let her know before I made any contact with the lender or with Dana. Then she asked me a question that I had already been turning over in my mind. Did I want to stop the loan application before disbursement, or did I want to let it reach the point where Dana had to appear in person to complete the final documentation? I thought about all the times Dana had smiled and said she did not know what I was talking about. I thought about every soft, plausible denial I had watched her deploy over 6 years. I thought about the fact that if I called the lender today and flagged the fraud, Dana would claim it was a misunderstanding. She would say she thought she had permission. She would tell Caleb I had overreacted. And she would believe herself. I wanted her to walk into a room with a notary and a loan officer, and commit this on paper, in person, with her own hand. Let the application proceed, I told my attorney. But flag it for review with the lender's fraud department. I want everything documented through final execution. My attorney was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You've done this before, haven't you?" I told her I had done it professionally. She said that explained it. That same evening, Dana called. She had been calling every few days for the past week with variations of the same project. She and her boyfriend were interested in opening a small restaurant. They had found a space. The numbers were, according to Dana, very exciting. She had been dropping this into conversation the way you leave a cup out on a counter, and hope someone fills it without being asked. That evening her pitch had changed. "Mara," she said, "I need to ask you something and I need you to hear me out before you say anything." She always opened this way. It was her way of pre-flagging my objections as impatient. "There is a lender that reached out to Caleb about tapping some of your home equity for a short-term bridge loan. Just enough to cover the restaurant build-out. The terms are really reasonable and honestly, with your equity position it would barely be a blip. The loan officer wants to do the final paperwork this Thursday at the branch office. You just need to come in and co-sign since it's your property too." I let about 4 seconds pass. "This Thursday," I repeated. "Yes," she said. 2 o'clock. It would take 20 minutes, tops. I want you to picture what Dana was doing in that moment. She had already submitted an application in my name. She had already forged my signature on the authorization documents. The loan had been conditionally approved. All that remained was a final in-person verification, which in her plan was going to involve me walking in and unknowingly confirming a loan I had supposedly already pre-authorized online. She thought she was tidying up a loose end. She thought she was bringing me in to legitimize paperwork I had already signed in her imagination. She was actually bringing me in to sit across a table from a notary while she completed the fraud in person. "I'll be there," I said. She exhaled. She said wonderful. She said this was going to be really good for everyone. She hung up, confident she had just solved her financing problem. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment. Then I opened my laptop and typed a summary of the phone call and sent it to my attorney. Then I went and found Caleb. I want to say this carefully because I know what you might be thinking about Caleb. He did not know. I know he did not know because I know my husband and because when I sat beside him on the couch that evening and walked him through everything, including the audit log and the IP address and the conversation I had just had with Dana, the color left his face in a way I have never seen before. He went very quiet. He asked me 3 times if I was certain and each time I showed him the documentation. By the 3rd time he stopped asking. He cried. Quietly, with his hands on his knees, looking at the floor. Not because he was weak, but because something had just broken that he had been carrying carefully for 35 years, and now he had to decide what to do with the pieces. I put my hand on his back and I told him I was handling it. I told him that I needed him to do one thing, which was to not contact Dana before Thursday. He asked me what was going to happen on Thursday. I told him that Dana was going to try to complete a loan application using my forged identity, and that I was going to let her do it in front of a notary and a federal form, and that our attorney was going to be present, and that after that, it would no longer be a family matter. He was silent for a long time. Then he asked if there was any version of this where Dana didn't go to prison. I told him that depended entirely on Dana, not on me. I told him that I had not done anything except exist and have a credit report. He nodded slowly. He said he knew. He did not call Dana. Thursday afternoon. The branch office of the lender smelled like recycled air and carpet cleaner and had the specific energy of a place where people make decisions they will later regret in fluorescent lighting. There were 4 chairs around a small conference table, a box of tissues that suggested they knew this energy well, and a laminated poster on the wall about financial empowerment that I found quietly ironic. My attorney was already seated when I arrived. I had worn a blazer I reserved for depositions. I sat down across from the loan officer, a man named Mr. Garrett, who had kind eyes and a slightly apologetic way of moving his hands when he explained things, as if he already suspected this appointment was not going to go the way the calendar suggested. Dana arrived 7 minutes late. She was wearing a yellow dress and carrying an oversized tote bag, and she came through the door with the particular energy of someone who believes the meeting is a formality. She saw my attorney first and something moved across her face, fast and gone. Then she saw me and her smile recalibrated so quickly I almost admired it. "Mara," she said. "You made it." "I did," I said. She sat down. She placed her tote on the floor. She asked Mr. Garrett if they should get started. She did not ask why my attorney was there. Not asking was its own kind of answer. Mr. Garrett cleared his throat and opened the file in front of him. He had already been briefed by his institution's fraud department, who had been briefed by my attorney. He did not know the full shape of what was about to happen, but he knew enough to move carefully and to let the documentation do the work. "All right," he said. "This is the final closing packet for the bridge loan application submitted under Mara's name and social security number. Before we proceed to notarization, I need to confirm some information." He looked at Dana. "Can you confirm that the electronic signature on the initial authorization, submitted on February 9th, was authorized by the account holder?" Dana smiled. She said yes, absolutely. We had discussed it as a family and Mara had agreed to move forward. He nodded. He slid a single page across the table toward her. "This is a certification form required for all home equity applications processed through our office," he said. "It confirms that no part of this application was submitted without the express written consent of the primary property holder, and that no identifying information, including social security number or digital signature, was used without direct authorization. There is also a declaration that you, as the co-applicant, did not submit or facilitate the submission of any documentation on behalf of the property holder without their explicit real-time consent." He paused. "By signing, you are certifying all of that under penalty of federal fraud statutes." The room was very quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight. Dana looked at the form. She looked at me. She looked at Mr. Garrett. Her smile had not moved, but something behind her eyes was doing very rapid calculations. Then she picked up the pen and she signed it. Her hand did not shake. I watched her sign her name and I felt something settle in my chest, cold and final and absolute, the way a verdict sounds when the jury foreperson reads it aloud without inflection. I had given her so many off-ramps. The moment she realized this meeting was not what she expected. The moment my attorney sat down. The moment Mr. Garrett described the certification form. She could have stopped at any one of those moments and said there had been a misunderstanding. She could have said she thought she had permission. She could have set the pen down. She could have chosen any version of retreat. She chose to sign. Mr. Garrett collected the form and slid it to my attorney. My attorney opened a folder and placed 3 documents on the table in a neat row. "The first is an affidavit of identity theft filed with the FTC," my attorney said, her voice precise and even. "The second is a fraud report filed with your institution's compliance department 14 days ago. The third is the forensic audit log from your application portal, which shows the electronic signature bearing my client's name was submitted on February 9th from an IP address registered to a residential property in Gastonia. On that date and time, my client was present in a legal deposition in Uptown Charlotte. Attendance documentation is attached." Dana's face had stopped performing. Everything that had been holding her expression in place simply let go at once. My attorney looked at Mr. Garrett. "Given the certification she has just signed and the documentation in front of you, I believe this meets your institution's threshold for mandatory fraud reporting." Mr. Garrett had the look of a man who had seen difficult things in his career and had not expected this particular Tuesday to be one of them. He said yes. He stood up. He asked us to wait and stepped out of the room. Dana looked at me. For the first time in 6 years, she did not have a frame around the look, no pleasantness, no plausible construction layered over it. It was just her face, stripped down to something that was mostly disbelief with a thin edge of fury underneath. "I want to talk to Caleb," she said. "Caleb isn't here," I said. "This is my brother's house," she said. "His equity too. Your brother is aware of this situation," I said. "And his name appears nowhere on this application because you didn't use his name. You used mine." She opened her mouth and then closed it. Whatever she had planned to say apparently did not survive contact with that particular fact. "Mr. Garrett came back with 2 other people, a woman from the compliance team and a man in a different kind of jacket who introduced himself efficiently and explained to Dana that the branch was required to file a suspicious activity report, and that she would need to remain for a short time to provide a statement. He said it the way people in those roles say things, clearly, without effect, leaving no grammatical room for negotiation. Dana looked at me one more time as they led her to a separate room. "I want you to know," she said, "that I did this for all of us." That is how she actually saw it. I believe that completely. That is the thing about people who keep invisible ledgers of what they feel they are owed. They do not experience themselves as taking. They experience themselves as finally collecting. I picked up my bag and I walked out. My attorney met me in the parking lot. She had been in this work long enough not to say anything that filled the air unnecessarily. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was fine. She said the referral to federal authorities would likely happen within the week given the combination of identity theft, wire fraud, and the certification she had just signed under penalty of perjury. I thanked her and we shook hands and she drove away. I sat in my car for 4 minutes. I did not call anyone. I watched the clouds move across the parking lot sky, slow and indifferent, and I thought about the 7 years I had spent keeping meticulous records while telling myself it was just professional habit. And I thought about Caleb's face on the couch 2 nights earlier and the way he had asked if there was any version where Dana didn't go to prison and how I had told him it depended on Dana. Dana had decided. She was indicted 11 weeks later. Wire fraud, identity theft, attempted bank fraud, and filing a fraudulent federal certification. The restaurant deal had already collapsed. Her boyfriend, who had known the funding source, was questionable in ways he had found convenient not to examine, was listed as a person of interest. Her sentencing hearing is scheduled for next month. Caleb has been quiet in a way that is different from his usual quiet. He still believes the best in people. He is just doing the sad work of recalculating who the people are. He told me 2 weeks ago that he does not know how to be a brother to someone who is not his sister anymore. I told him that the person who used our home and my name and 7 years of holiday dinners as cover for a scheme was not the sister he thought he had. That he was grieving something real but that the loss had happened before the parking lot. He cried again. I let him. We have not sent a card or a letter. There is a restraining order in place for the duration of the proceedings. Our house is still ours. The equity is intact. The loan was never dispersed. I moved the forensic files into a folder on my desktop labeled closed, the same word I use at the end of every case when the numbers have finally told the whole truth and there is nothing left to dispute. Tonight I am sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold and the particular kind of quiet that comes after something large has been set down. Not peace exactly. More like the specific stillness of a room after all the furniture has been pushed back into place. There is a version of this story where I had called Dana the day I found the inquiry and given her the chance to come clean. Maybe she would have. Maybe the version of her that signed her name in that conference room with her hand perfectly steady was always going to be the version that showed up no matter when I knocked. I do not spend much time on that question. What I know is this. The money is mine because I earned it. The house is mine because I built toward it. And the silence I now have, the clean, documented, legally enforceable silence of a closed case, is something I paid for in full with 7 years of meticulous attention to things most people preferred not to count. If someone in your life has ever made you feel like your resources were a shared pool they could draw from without asking, leave a heart. And if you've ever had to protect what was yours from someone who should have been protecting you instead, you already know what kind of locked door I'm talking about. Subscribe if you want to hear what happens at sentencing.